Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the At the Water's Edge podcast, where we look for insights beyond the headlines to take a practitioner's view on national security and geopolitics. It's the 29th of March, 2025. Let's get started. Now, it won't be very surprising to hear that as we transition from the global war on terror to the era of great power competition, all sorts of new technologies and weapon systems and stuff needs to be developed in order to prepare for a conflict with a near peer or peer adversary like China, Russia, Iran, all the big ones we hear about. And it also won't be surprising to anyone who's been involved in the space at all for even 5 minutes that our traditional defense industrial base sucks at delivering new weapon systems, new technology in a timely, cost-efficient manner. And they really suck at actually producing anything that helps the warfighter. Their track record leaves much to be desired. So it's been a lot of fun to watch a whole bunch of really smart guys and gals coming out of college, your Stanford, your MIT, your Harvard, all those schools. And instead of trying to get rich with cryptocurrency or coming up with a new trading algorithm or just selling their souls as consultants to the highest bidder, they're actually founding startups focused on defense tech. It's the craziest thing. And some of them are actually having a lot of success and producing some really cool stuff. Hopefully the contracting process doesn't screw them. But there's a lot of great folks doing some great things out there. One of them is the guy we're talking to today. His name is Ethan Thornton. He is the founder and CEO of Mach Industries in California. Now, this guy is 21 years old. He went to MIT, then dropped out to start his own company. He's raised over $300 million in venture capital to support it. Currently has a contract with the Army to produce prototypes of his products. And his company is focused on the development and manufacture of drones. They've got two really cool ones right now that they're testing out. One's called Viper. It's a vertical takeoff and landing drone. Basic idea is that you can launch this thing from anywhere in the world. You don't need any type of infrastructure, runways, that sort of stuff. Other one's called Glide, a high-altitude glider developed to carry munitions hundreds of miles. Strike anywhere you want, all over the globe. Cool thought. And apparently these things are super cheap compared to, your F-35s. Of course, everything's cheap compared to an F-35. And all those fun strike assets. Infinitely more usable than the MQ-9s that many of us are familiar with. And the company is not only focused on producing these drones, but actually coming up with a way to do distributed manufacturing so that you can avoid having a centralized production facility that could be struck in the opening salvos of a near-peer fight. Really thinking through this problem from a holistic perspective and coming up with some cool stuff. So I had a great chance to sit down and talk with them. Very generous with this time. And with that, let's go get to our conversation with Ethan Thornton, founder and CEO of Mach Industries. Well, Ethan, good morning, man, and welcome to the podcast. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. I hear congratulations are in order on two different fronts. One, I guess you've recently raised some hundreds of millions of dollars for your company. And two, I hear you're finally able to buy your own beer. Congratulations on both fronts there. I'm not sure which of those you're more excited about, but props.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you are the CEO of a company called Mach Industries. You're 21 years old, I'm told. Tell us, what is Mach Industries? What are you guys doing?
So we build defense hardware, primarily at the moment to offset them. So our goal is to build asymmetric capabilities that give the U.S. an advantage and for the future near-peer conflicts. And so hardware design, manufacture, building, that's right now what are primarily long-range strike assets.
Like what type of long-range strike assets? Hypersonics or death rays? What are we talking?
So right now it's not hypersonics. I think that's an area we'll work in at some point. But right now, I actually think we need more massive scope. So right now we have two strike assets. One's a stratospheric glide bomb, and then the other's a vertical takeoff, essentially one-way jet-powered UAZ.
Okay. And how long have you guys been operating as a company?
We made our first hire about 2 years ago. I've been working on Mach now for probably 5 years or so. But yeah,
Okay.
made our first hire 2 years ago, raised our big kind of funding round about a year and a half ago. And so it's pretty new.
Okay. And why did you found Mach Industries? What got you started on this?
Yeah, I think these capabilities need to exist for the American military to remain relevant in the next era of sort of unmanned warfare, right? So right now, so the way we fight wars is changing at a pretty rapid pace, and there are conflicts overseas, obviously, that you can use to point at these effects. But it's very clear that the era of unmanned wars are here. That the next major war the U.S. is engaged in, regardless of how far in the future that happens, will be an unmanned war, right? And so it's incredibly critical that we are investing deeply, not only in the platforms that actually fight those wars, but also in their manufacturing, their logistics, and the energy that fuels them. And so found in Mach because I am not satisfied with the pace we're doing that. Not to
Mhm.
say people aren't working hard. It's just a really, really hard problem, and one we're excited to be a part of, sadly.
So you got this company, you're trying to create these advanced long range strike assets. You said vertical takeoff, and what was the other one? Stratospheric drop.
Yeah. So
So what
our
is that? You have
goal,
like some loading up there in the atmosphere? What's going on?
yeah, that one I can't talk as much about from
Okay.
like a yeah, from a concept of operation standpoint. But essentially, like the way you can think about our assets is the goal is to give ground maneuver units the ability to hit targets very far down range without the need for strategic assets. And so if you and I are sort of single soldiers, we can actually deploy these things ourselves and be able to take out a target far down range. And the
Hmm.
big deal there is if you can avoid infrastructure, if you can avoid runways, if you can avoid need for sort of complex logistics, you're much more survivable on a piece of battlefield, right? If the future world is one where there are sensors everywhere, right? Where because of unmanned systems, the cost to do deep strike has gone down pretty significantly. Runways become much more difficult to defend. Factories become much more difficult to defend. So both in our manufacturing is another thing we're working on. In the manufacturing and the platforms themselves, you want to be very decentralized, right? And
Hmm.
flexible. You want to be able to launch them everywhere and then sort of immediately disappear and have nothing to back target. And so there's a lot that goes into that from a capabilities perspective and associated with that.
So, from a philosophy of use perspective, what you're describing is you want to take a capability that theoretically America could do at the presidential or Secretary of Defense level right now, a long range strike on a target, and take that and make it scalable across the entire ground force so that a company commander with a radio and a beat on a target could also access that same strike capability without relying on a huge tail end.
Exactly. So there are other companies working hard right now to actually provide the deep ISR at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we're slotting in at more the kinetic level. Our our future products will certainly include ISR as well. Um, but yeah, the goal is that again, you said it very well. If you can decentralize that, the command chain can obviously be shorter, but then much more importantly, those things can be more survivable and deployed in much greater.
Okay. And you mentioned other companies working on other parts of this. So you're focused on with the products you're currently making, the kinetic part of the kill chain that like lives in an entire ecosystem of capabilities. Are you able to use the capabilities that the U.S. government currently has to deploy the technology that you're using? Or does this come into fruition with the evolution of other ecosystem partners filling out other parts of the kill chain?
It's both. It's both, right? So like your goal with any product you sell is that it has relevance in kind of the current field chain, but then the
Mm-hmm.
hardware is such that as the software gets better, you can continue to integrate with different products you or other companies. So an example here
Okay.
of kind of what this would mean is right now you'd go and deploy Viper like Unmanned, right? Like you'd set the thing up, type in a coordinate and launch it. And then Viper will go and hit that. But you want the hardware to be built such that in a future world, you can actually communicate Viper to Viper. You can communicate from a Viper to an ISR asset. You actually have the hardware capable of doing a pretty advanced autonomy, such that A,
Mm-hmm.
as your software improves, and then arguably more importantly, as the ISR asset improve, right, as whatever sort of EW environment you're rolling into gets more complex, the ability to leverage other like just other assets is really, really powerful. And so that's something we work on with that product. That also gives us obviously the ability to sell our own products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like another example here is Viper navigates in a GTX9 environment a few ways, but one of those ways is visual, right? And so it has preloaded imagery of the terrain it's going after. But terrain during war can change very significantly. Um, and so having the ability to go and send an ISR asset, right, that's going and probably carrying a much, much, much more expensive communication system, a much more expensive camera, pre-mapping that terrain. Those things are actually very hard to sense, right? And then sends that data back. You then retrain your model and not, I guess you're not retraining the models, but you take those images and something back that can be much more accurate. So yeah, again, the hardware is designed to be capable across a wide range of uses, and then the software will sort of be improved and done separate.
Okay, and to back up a minute, I'm assuming Viper is one of your main product lines that you're selling.
Yeah, sorry, I should have made that more clear. That's the
tell us about Viper. Okay, vertical takeoff.
So it looks like about a 6.5 foot long fighter jet. It's something you set on its tail, a gimbal engine exhaust. And so it takes off vertically like a rocket and then transitions into horizontal flight and then cruises horizontally. And so right now, you made a face. I have to. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Cool. But yeah, it's a cool aircraft. Flies at a couple 100 miles an hour, can get up to tens of thousands of feet altitude. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're sending it sort of one way, and so the initial cutoff is just to send it forward and blow it up. One can imagine a world where it's doing a bunch of other things, given that it is architected very similarly to a fighter jet.
Well, and how does the payload and capability in that compare to something like an MQ-9 Reaper that we're using in Afghanistan, as far as flight and ability to drop a Hellfire? I mean, vertical takeoff is cool, but what's the differentiator here?
Yeah, so Hellfire costs about $150K and has like I forget the exact numbers, but something like a 3 to 10 mile range, depending on the altitude you drop it from. Viper itself costs $100K, right? Depending on variation, but like on the lower end costs $100K. And so it's actually cheaper than a Hellfire in of itself. Carries a larger warhead than a Hellfire. And has a range on like the hundreds of miles, right? And so Viper is something you could afford to send one way cheaper than you would a Hellfire. The other thing with an MQ-9 is like an MQ-9 is not survivable in a future combat environment, right? Like these things are now getting shot down all the time. They cost tens of millions of dollars. It's questionable in like a near peer conflict if your runways you're launching them are even going to be survivable. You certainly can't produce them at scale during wartime. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, Viper would be something we drop from an MQ-9, just based on size and cost. But we're also engineering for the future world that's going to exist for an MQ-9 that arguably already exists.
Yeah,
where an MQ-9 is actually gone.
Okay. And so in 5 years, this has gone from good idea fairy in the back of your head to you've got production prototypes that are flying right now?
Yeah. So we're doing pretty much weekly flight tests now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you started this thing when you're 16 then?
Yeah, I did. I mean,
nice.
I obviously didn't have any resources, right? So
so where were you when you're 16 years old? Like, where's your bedroom at? Where are you living?
Just with my parents back in Texas.
Okay.
And so like it's hard to define when exactly Mach started. I worked as an auto technician and used that to save money and then start buying tools and selling like knives and other things, and then use that to just like pay to experiment on Mach stuff essentially. And so Mach used to be named Fluo, which was the name of my like knife making company. And so there's actually no like clear handover from knife making to what we're doing now. And frankly, like it's kind of all the same. Like your goal is just to keep accruing resources to be able to have a bigger and bigger impact. And so, yeah, I mean,
that's pretty cool. So you skipped college and went straight into, I want to start my own $100 million drone startup?
I went for a little bit. So
Okay.
I didn't know what venture capital was. It was like very, very clear that I wasn't going to be able to bootstrap Mach as a company. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went to MIT to study aerospace engineering, and I was going to join the Air Force and do that for like 8 to 10 years and then go and start Mach. But then kind of two things happened. I realized it is possible to raise venture capital as someone who's young and wins. So I'm very grateful for our investors on that. And then the second thing is it's increasingly clear how existential minimums these things are. Like we're losing all of our war game, right? Like the gap between us and China from a production capacity standpoint is widening by the day. Like I ultimately I just couldn't sit still. And so we had to figure stuff out.
Nice. So what's your sales pitch going out there into the venture capital world? You made your first hire 2 years ago, so you probably need to start getting funding 3 years ago. You're walking around as a young man with a bright idea. How do you get money?
Just walk folks through the dynamics of the market and the technology that needs to exist. It's increasingly apparent that the future of warfare is unmanned. It's increasingly apparent that we need a couple companies, as many as possible, frankly, delivering these new unmanned capabilities. It's clear that there's a large market, right? And then I was able to cultivate investment, which I was super grateful for.
Cool. And who's on the hook for buying this? You mentioned going to the Air Force, but is the Air Force primary customer, or the Army, some other agency? Who's buying these things from you? Who do you think is going to buy these things from you?
So right now, our first contract is with the Army. We have contracts with the Air Force as well, but like the legitimate sort of development contract is with the Army. We'll end up selling a good bit overseas to allied countries. So a big thing for me is if through Mach we can provide like hundreds of thousands of very capable assets to kind of partner countries at risk, we can create deterrence. Right. So if China's looking at invading Taiwan, or if China's has already invaded Taiwan and is then looking at invading Japan or South Korea, if we can pre-place millions of things capable of doing like strategic strikes on like a Chinese invading force, that obviously significantly changes the calculus of an aggressor. And so for me, a big goal is being able to produce these things at scale, be able to produce a lot of what we focus on is asymmetric capability, right? So if China matches our technology and dominates on scale, which they do, the only way to win is by building sort of asymmetric, what we call it, like essentially novel and creative hardware that provides like a dollar edge, right? So if China currently right now produces like 232 times the shipping tonnage of the U.S. So for every one ship we build, they can build 232. It's essentially what that means. But if with something like Glide that costs $20,000 a piece, I can render a $10 million ship inoperable. That's like $1 offset. I've just created. And so that's a kind of our main goal with our products. And then if you can export those products to the partner countries, you can create returns that they wouldn't otherwise be able to cultivate.
And how are you actually making these things right now? Where's your production facility at?
So it's in Huntington Beach, South LA. So our manufacturing model is to very rapidly over the next few years go and build a decentralized sort of global supply chain. And so another big thing that happens in these future wars, and we've seen this in Ukraine a little bit, is centralized factories are taken out. And so you really don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. And so for us, we have about 100,000 square feet in Huntington. That'll get us to like low single digit thousands of airframes per month, right? Depending on the airframe. So that's for something like Glide, for something like Viper, it's in the high hundreds to 1,000 a month. But then as we expand, it's what we call forwards. We'll be building tens of these factories hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years. So we recently announced our first partnership on this program. So that's Heaven Drones. It's a U.S. company that has a pretty strong Israeli sort of customer set. And so we're actually partnering with them, and we'll be building a couple factories actually with them overseas, given that they have access to customers that we can't otherwise access. And so the model is essentially joint venturing with companies overseas, who have the customer access, who sort of have the customer trust, who know the investment ecosystem over there. They provide some level of capital, and then obviously the customer, and then we go and provide technology and execution and actually go and build the factory and produce. And so this is another means of sort of helping our allies, right? It goes kind of a level deeper than arming them. If you can actually work with people to provide organic manufacturing capacity of these assets, you can really start to change their level of military readiness in a way that is non-cumbersome to the U.S. taxpayer, right? Like this is actually something that's generating money for America, and so it's a cool tool. I'm excited to be deploying.
No, that's exciting. So with these factories, I mean, at what point in the value-added chain does the factory start manufacturing? Because you're trying to decentralize the global supply chain. Like, how far down into raw commodities are you going from, finished product rolling out one end versus how broken down are those inputs on the other end?
So my goal is to go up to the mine. So like the U.S. needs a supplier that is up to the mine and then up to generation of electricity, and that'll be forged. Right now, we're at like the full airframe level. We just announced our jet engine factory yesterday, and so we'll be producing jet engines. We already design our own avionics, and we'll be announcing like a PCBA, a PCB facility. But those are obviously U.S. partners in the meantime here in LA. But yeah, I mean, pretty immediately we need to vertically integrate up to mine. Now that won't be done in obviously the factories were like the same factory. Unfortunately, will not make the carbon fiber airframe. It's like the place you're getting the natural gas to like run your generators to actually produce your electricity. And so the goal is you kind of have two different types of factories. You have flexible factories like the one in Huntington that do carbon fiber, plastics, metallic, wire harnessing, all the things that are sort of airframe specific, and they can rapidly kind of change between airframes. And then you're bringing in jet engines, you're bringing in like your chips, your PCBs, and then you're kind of assembling it. But that assembly can be super flexible. And so Huntington, we can switch between a bunch of different airframes. Your other type of factory is very specialized, right? Like this is your jet engine casting facility. Like you can't go from like casting Inconel on like the hot end of a jet engine to like producing carbon fiber. Those are very different tools. And so building out that kind of specialty capacity in specific locations.
And how do you plan on running these factories efficiently? Because one thing that America's great in is high-end tech labor for design, engineering, all that stuff. Very hard to find the skilled manual labor to do high-end manufacturing and fabrication, even just to source that stuff into the same factory and get the laborers on site. Very challenging. So is there something unique about how you're running these factories to help mitigate that? Or do you have relationships to build that skilled labor pool?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of all of the above. I would say I actually do think Americans are good at building things. We're a bit expensive, but I would put us up against anyone. And we've seen like I've actually been able to build a lot of things with a lot of incredible technicians I have a ton of respect for here in Huntington. But yeah, it's challenging, right? So you're dealing with a more skilled labor force and you need to use them as such. And so instead of having someone sit on the line and like manually TIG weld something all day, have them run like an automated laser welding machine, right? Instead of so there's a level of like light automation that I think is super important. I'm actually adverse to like really heavy automation from day one. I think we'll ramp up to it over time. But a big thing for me with these factories is being able to quickly scale them. Like if we go to war, this factory has to be pretty cookie cutter and using non-specialty tools, which means I'm probably not going to be investing crazy heavily in like very specialty technology. Just because the second we go to war, that the lead times on all that stuff will be insane. And so light automation, I'm a huge fan of, right? Like you can have one technician run 80 3D printers. You can have one technician run like a couple automated and laser welding cells. The next is a big emphasis on like software. So I haven't announced it yet, but we're forming a pretty deep software partnership to actually write the software performed. Mm-hmm. And so I think that'll be helpful. And then another key part is being able to produce in some of these other countries, right? So like if we're selling to Estonia, if I can, or wherever, right? But like if I'm selling to a very specific country, where the labor's cheaper, producing there is another great advantage. So there are also advantages to having a scalable supply chain. Obviously, you can't take that too far, right? Like you need a ton of in-U.S. production. Yeah, sorry, that's kind of a rambling answer.
Yeah, no, it's good. Because these are all the messy details that make things complicated. It literally is two completely different skill sets. One, to have a great idea. Two, to be able to productize it. Three, to be able to manufacture it. Four, to be able to do it profitably. Five, to then exist in a marketplace with fast followers. So looks like you're crushing through 1 through 4 right now. But from your experience, having this idea, starting your own company, now building factories in the United States and California of all the place, not necessarily known for the most, business-friendly labor environment. What's actually more challenging in this process? Is it coming up with the right drone tech and UAV ideas, or is it actually creating a factory and trying to have a productized offering? Which has been more challenging?
The hardest so far has been the engineering development by far. So
really?
Kind of stack ranking difficulty. Yeah, because that's what we put our foot in the ground is being best in the world at, right? So like if Mach could right now, as 2-year-old Mach, if I could be best in the world at one thing, it would be rapidly cranking out iterations of my products, right? And so I think it's induced complexity. If we're moving on like standard timelines, it would be easier. But I think we make life very hard on ourselves to try and get these things out faster. And so that's probably the most difficult. I'd say second is manufacturing. And these two will certainly switch as we ramp into full rate production. But second is manufacturing, right? So like we take pride in doing our own prototyping. We take pride in kind of vertically integrating everything that it all makes sense to from the beginning. And so that's just a lot of complexity to manage. 3 is definitely dealing with DoD. I think that one is
I was about to ask you about government contracting, what that's been like. Let's go into that.
Yeah, look, I actually think it's not nearly as bad as people think. Mm-hmm. I think I'm very fortunate to get to be a fast follower on this one. Like I think if this were 10 years ago and there were no prior art on how to win these deals, it'd be a lot more difficult. But yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's difficult, but it's very clear that the government wants to be doing the right thing. And so you just have to present, that's a crazy statement. Let me, certain people within the bureaucracy really want to do the right things.
Yep.
The bureaucracy is set up to do a very specific thing though. And so you have to package those right things well, such that they're capable of doing those. Yeah, it's certainly, so like Viper for us was like off the whiteboard in like September, flying in like mid-January. And that is certainly like orders of magnitude more difficult so far than the government size.
Now, did the government fund that, or was that all private capital that fund that?
So the government co-funded a good chunk of that.
Under what type of contracting vehicle? Like, I'm assuming this has to be like a prototyping OTA.
So I actually don't know if I'm allowed to speak to the specific contract vehicle.
Okay.
But yeah, it wasn't a significantly large contract. It was essentially a contract to build and kinetically test flight. So prototype the thing, take it through a couple rounds of flight testing, and then on a military demonstration where the customer's actually then going to pull together a bunch of end users, go in and fly a bunch of these things with warheads.
What type of feedback from the end user have you gotten?
A ton. I mean, it's incredibly important. I think it's difficult. It's kind of one of those things where you have to show something for them to tell you it doesn't work usually, and then they'll quickly tell you when it doesn't work, and then you iterate past that. Yeah, I've been super grateful for all the feedback we've gotten. I'd say we're pretty well engaged. That's another nice part about having this contract is the ability to have all these conversations. I think it's so hard to get a product to work every time in the mud, in the rain. If you're launching something like Viper in the wind, right? To throw it in a shipping container and have it baked in the sun for a decade and then take it out and launch it when it has to launch. So that's another one of the difficult things. It's like, in like the space launch market, you get to operate your own vehicles, right? So like, not to say Viper's nearly as complex as like a Falcon 9, but SpaceX generally gets to have their engineers not the Falcon 9. A difficult thing about our industry is you have to take this aircraft and then, for us specifically, like, give it to someone who's going to expect to click like 5 buttons and have it launch 100% of the time. And there's a lot of engineering that goes into making that happen.
Yeah. Well, how do you balance too, as you're doing your prototyping and iterating on your product, how much of it is creating new capacity and how much of it is focusing on customer usability? Because you're going to have some crusty E6 sitting in the rain somewhere who just got orders to pull this thing out of a Connex, set it up and hit send in 15 minutes. So when you're doing your product design, how much of it is it capacity versus usability?
It goes through stages, right? So like, you start with purely capacity optimization around a specific con-op. Like, obviously, you have to know who's launching the thing, how they're launching it. But it starts with capacity, and then as the program matures, you get into first end user side. And right now, we're kind of somewhere in that handover. There's still a lot of capacity work to do in terms of like refining accuracy, making sure that the GNSS denied navigation works, and then sort of integrating a warhead. And then past that, like once those 3 kind of milestones are cleared, it will be pretty much purely usability.
Yeah. So you mentioned fast followers. One thing I'm curious about is that we have the traditional defense industrial base in America, Lockheed Martin, Huntington Ingalls Industries, Boeing, all those players. You're seeing a huge demand signal. You're getting a bunch of venture capital behind you. Why is it you think that these large defense manufacturers with all these experience and tie into the government, why aren't they already doing this? Why is it almost the market is allowing someone like you to come in and be this disruptive? Because that's a story in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think those companies and their procurement models and their manufacturing models are all set up to deploy larger assets over longer timelines, right? So like Mach could not go and build an F-35. We're not structured to build an F-35, even assuming we had the capital. Like, we're actually not set up well as a company to go and build an aircraft like that. And so there's a lot that goes into kind of the engineering of how your company works, how you get through ideas, how quickly you iterate, how risk tolerant you are. If you're a prime, you're very, very specifically positioned to deploy something like an F-35, right? So you're going to subcontract everything on the supply chain side. You're going to have teams of like thousands of engineers working on this aircraft. Your procurement model is going to be cost plus and sort of long-term thinking of a big program of record. It's different for these systems, mainly on the former two, right? Like for us, the engineering team on Viper, the actual people who like work full time on Viper is probably 5, and then of engineers that split time between Viper and other programs, total it's maybe 25. And so in our industry, you just want much smaller, insanely high talent level teams who's absolutely sprinting to iterate as quick as possible. Because we can crash airplanes. Like if Lockheed crashes an F-35, it's a really big deal. We like crash Vipers on like a routine basis. Like we have like a Viper graveyard. Um, and then similar on the manufacturing side, right? Like totally vertically integrated. So all that being said, like the primes are just not institutionally set up well to deliver things on these timelines at these costs.
So your real advantage is in business model, not in technology per se.
Yeah, which I think quickly creates a technology advantage. Like once we iterate on Viper like 5 times, it's going to be better than what Lockheed could ship themselves. And then once we get our vertical integration dialed in, it's also going to be several times cheaper than what would be built through a more subcontract or centric production model. And so, yeah, like technology flows down from business model, but pretty quickly, like on the order of a couple months, to the point where like I really don't think Lockheed in a million years could right now sit down and design a Viper on anywhere close to the timeline we did it.
Yeah. How do you go about picking the team to let you do this? Because if you wake up one day and say, all right, I want to sell something to the government. I want to, look this way. Here's my product. Here's my differentiator. Here's my business case. Here's the geopolitical concerns that we're responding to. I now need to go find people. Most of the people that if you went on LinkedIn and search for are coming from Lockheed, HII, all those places, government procurement offices. How would you find your business team to pull this together? Because it almost seems to me like the engineering talent would be easier to at least identify and search for.
Are you saying on the government relations side, on the engineering side, on the operations side? We actually have very different models.
Okay. Talk to me about your models.
I'm happy to talk through them. So,
yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There are certainly similarities.
Do you have like a C-suite with a COO? I mean, you're the CEO, but how do you break down compared to a traditional company?
Yeah, we don't have a COO right now, so that's something I'm actively hiring for.
Okay.
Right now, we have different business lines that kind of all, or whatever you want to call it, that all kind of report directly to me. Engineering, manufacturing, go to market, and then operations, which is people, HR, IT, legal, and finance. And each of those have sort of leads. I think the way we assess people is, you absolutely have to be mission driven. Like working at Mach is not fun. It's super rewarding, but it's super long hours. It's just really difficult. And so you have to be mission driven, right? Like if you look at most of the people on our team, they do it for the same reason I do, which is that they love our country and like really think that we're in a really bad spot right now if we don't improve. That's the first. Next sort of main cultural mark is we look for like very earnest, ready people, right? So you want people that are low ego. Not to say they're not confident. Like you have to trust in your abilities, but low ego, willing to work on a team, willing to have their ideas sort of ripped to shreds, right? Like I want a culture where someone can tell me I'm an idiot, and vice versa. It's based on ideas, right? Not ad hominem. And then I guess it then depends based on what business line you're talking about. Like if you're talking to an engineer, you want someone who can't do anything but engineer, right? Like you want to put them in front of hardware and they get like very, very excited looking at said hardware. You want people that their entire lives have just been building things. On operations, it's a bit different. You want people who are very kind of service minded. And then very obsessed with kind of the small details. I don't know if this is interesting at all. I'm also
keep going. I got to follow up, but keep going.
Yeah, let's hear your follow up because I will rant about this for too long.
Okay, so let me ask you this: so you started off, as a young tinkerer, engineering minded. So what was your transition like going from being an engineer to being a business leader? Because dealing with people is infinitely more complicated than dealing with things.
Yeah, and I still like to consider myself an engineer. I would say I just get to engineer people and businesses now instead. But it's still the act of building. Like you're still building a machine. The machine isn't hardware. It's processes and sort of a go to market and it's the way everything ties together. And so I still think I get to do engineering on a day-to-day basis. it's not nearly as technical as I would have liked for it to be, but it's still the same level of like preemptive problem solving.
Yeah. And who do you have in your corner, either formally or informally, as like your mentor, your informal board of directors? Like when you need to get unfiltered advice from somebody to make sure you're not going off the rails because you're sitting in a position of tremendous power and influence. You're a young guy who's killing it, but that's a lot to deal with for anyone on a day-to-day basis. Who are your touch points? Who can you rely on?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably biggest would just be our lead investors. Bedrock and Sequoia have both been sort of incredible to work with through this process. I think past that, it's probably family, like my parents. I'm still super close with and talk to them on a very routine basis about sort of the goings on.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also folks now who have been at the company since day one, right? So like my buddy who dropped out of MIT with me, his name's Ashton. We've been doing this stuff since we're in a dorm room. And so he has a pretty good grasp on stuff. He and I actually think pretty differently. And so it's a good kind of contrast and good approach.
Okay. Did either one of your parents ever start a business?
No.
Dang. So you're a talented guy, you're at MIT, and you want to drop out, move to California, start your own business. What was that conversation like?
It was good. I mean, they weren't frustrated. I think they were scared. Like they certainly didn't want me to fail. And so I think there's a lot of like fear-based anxiety. But they were certainly supportive.
Okay. What do you think? So you're doing a couple things here. You're identifying a gap in our strategic capabilities. You're trying to make it scalable. You're trying to provide deterrence at cost for allies and partners. But really, you're threading the needle on producing a new capability in a manufacturing and government contracting ecosystem that is not designed to make this as easy as it probably should be, or at least as accessible as it probably should be. What do you think needs to change about the defense industrial base in America to make people like you have more opportunities for success and provide the capabilities that you're providing for the actual warfighter? Because having been on the other side of this and looking in the civilian world and seeing capability, I'm like, dear God, I desperately wish I could just have that thing. And being told, oh, no, wait, you can't have that. We have this thing that's 20 years old, but it's painted green and there's a contract for it. So you're going to get this piece of junk instead. What needs to change about how we do the defense industrial base so that we can get more of what you got going on?
Great question.
Because I've spoken to a lot of people in this space, and you already sound more educated on the problems that you're trying to solve than other highly placed people at other companies I've spoken to.
I appreciate it. I think it's a really hard problem. I think it starts with the culture fit. Right. And so we need to find a way so like right now, bureaucrats are incentivized not to make mistakes. And that's just like a natural thing that happened. But like inherently, anytime you deploy a new capability, you're taking a risk. Right. And so we need to find a way to reward said bureaucrats for taking those risks when they pay off. Right. Like you can imagine how successful entrepreneurs would be if Mach fails, you lose your job. If Mach succeeds, your salary doesn't change, your position doesn't change, nothing changes. And so we need to find ways within the machine, and this is purely impractical. I'm just saying, like best case scenario, you find ways within the machine where people are incentivized not to further their own programs, not to avoid their own programs being shut down, but to truly go and win wars. That's the first. I think the second is we need a much better picture of what unmanned warfare looks like. Like we need better centralized sort of doctrine around what we actually expect things to look like once these assets are flying around. Like, does it make sense to be buying armored vehicles in a world where the Ukrainians have like pulled M1 Abrams off of that because quadcopters are exploding them left and right? And so I actually think that would be really helpful. Like if the DoD could go and lay out, like, if we fight China in a decade, here's what it takes to fight China. Don't. Private industry, go. And then just stupid stuff. Like if you could find a way to shorten the timeline between like an RFC being released and like results being down selected. Like even small shit like that is like small stuff. Sorry, I don't know. Small stuff like that.
You can say whatever the fuck you want here.
But it's incredibly helpful as a business, right? So like my business is like 2 years old. It can take 6 months to hear back about like the first down select on a program. And so that just makes it really, really difficult to move quickly. And so, yeah, no good answer there. I'm sorry for that. I think it's a really hard problem.
No, it's a wicked problem.
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. I think it's the role of private industry to meet the bureaucracy where it is more than vice versa, right? Like I'm not going to sit and wait for the procurement machine to change. I'm going to hire lobbyists. I'm going to hire folks who like know how to work within the current machine and just start pushing as hard as I can with the best technology I can. But I do remain hopeful, right? Like the things that we call like procurement right now aren't ancient, right? Like it wasn't done this way 150 years ago.
No.
And so my hope is that it actually can be replaced on some near-term timeline.
Okay. Well, 2 follow-ups for that. One's going to be about Doge. We'll hold off on that for a second. You mentioned unmanned warfare and tanks being pulled off the battlefield. And you've got these 2 main products, Glide and Viper, that are both aerial assets with long range that can hit things on the other side of the planet in their final iteration. And people can hear that and get to the fallacy that we can win wars purely through air power. Now it's just going to be unmanned air power. And I think about previous historical examples of when we thought we could do that, whether it was the bombing campaign in Vietnam, the bombing campaign that predated Desert Storm, what we did in Korea, strategic bombing in World War II. So where do you think what you're developing fits into the overall nature of war? Is it truly we're going to have assets that can go over the horizon and remove the warfighter from the battlefield completely? Or is this going to complement troops on the ground in a way that just completely changes how we visualize our ground formations?
Yeah, I mean, so I actually see our assets slotting at a tactical and strategic level, right? And so the tactical level is pretty obvious. Like there, you're not necessarily removing the warfighter, but if I'm deploying glides in Ukraine, right? Like you can think about them almost as much more intelligent mortar rounds that are like easier to obfuscate, that have like 30 times their range. Is a way you could think about glide. And like actually not massively dissimilar costs. And so in that world, like you're augmenting the warfighter. There's the exact opposite end though, which interests me a lot more, which is the strategic side, right? So like I don't know if you're familiar with the book Bomber Mafia, but it's kind of the origins of strategic air power and the Air Force. And like there was this concept during World War II of if we have the Norton bomb sight, if we can put a bomb in a barrel, right, you can go and instantly triple manufacturing capacity. That didn't work during World War II because the Norton bomb sight didn't work. And so we ended up switching over to massive firebombing like campaigns, right? And then there was kind of the promise of that in the like late back half of the 20th century. It's just very hard to reach like true scale with like a B-2 fighting force. Like no one's going to be able to put up 10,000 B-2s in like a day. And so I actually think we're on the strategic side. These assets are closer to realizing the world that group imagined, right? Like call it glides, call it hypersonics, whatever assets you want to use. We are at a place where you can put up tens of thousands of these things very, very, very quickly. And quickly sort of disable infrastructure, disable manufacturing capacity, disable sort of logistics. And that then becomes sort of the derivative of manned warfare. Like if you're not necessarily taking people out of the fight, but if I can cripple someone's industrial capacity and their shipping capacity such that the assets they can fight with are 100 times fewer in numbers, that obviously has a massive impact on the conflict. And so my goal on the strategic side with Mach's platforms is that the current manufacturing capacity will stop producing the first day of like a true phonetic conflict. Now, the other end of that is you can expect our adversary to have those capabilities too. And so then you need to start preparing sort of defenses for those capabilities. And this is where you just get into a terrifying sort of iteration loop that very quickly brings on unmanned war. B, you have to change your manufacturing, right? Like you just can't have 1,100 different subcontractors build your aircrafts like we do the F-35. You also can't have like multi-million square foot factories. They're quickly going to become like hypersonic missile sponges in the early hours of conflict. So it's kind of my take.
Another follow-up, you talked about culture. Right now, we're seeing probably the most aggressive attempt to change culture in the federal government that we've seen in a generation since Reagan, and they've actually gone farther than Reagan's gone already. What do you think the impact of Doge and what Elon's trying to do is going to have on the defense industrial base in general? And also specifically, do you see any impacts on your company, your current contracts, your ability to get them in the future? You must be mapping this out already. Can you provide any insights on how you're thinking about that?
I'm going to be incredibly boring and say I can't. And I, like unashamedly equal parts because I'm dodging the question and I just don't know. Like if I claimed to know what the hell was going on, I would be lying to you. I think I certainly have my ideas, but they're probably no better, if not slightly worse, than the ideas of other more policy centric, more political centric people you've had on. I can talk manufacture all day. I can talk like engineering and company building all day, but I really I'm not first.
Well, at least that's a fair answer, which is better than most people. Well, we're getting to the end of our time, and I've run through my list of good ideas, but I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us today, Ethan. Love what you're doing with the company, and I'm wishing you nothing but the best.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Awesome questions, and really enjoyed chatting stuff through.
Yeah. All right, we can go ahead and wrap it there for now, sir. Any final thoughts for the group?
No.
All right.
I think I'm good. Thanks for your time.
No, my pleasure. Okay.